find your seat. Wow, that's the quickest I've ever quieted down the room. Okay, a couple of announcements before we get started. One, the stamp for the common reading will be available after the talk is over in the foyer in front of the auditorium. So if you need that after the talk. Either side over here. So please come to the microphone to ask your question as we are taping, streaming something with Jay. So we want people to hear your question, so don't just stand up and scream out your question. So welcome everyone, and thank you for coming to tonight's event. I'm Lisa Guerrero. I'm Associate Professor of Critical Culture, Gender, and Race Studies, and I am an unabashed fangirl of tonight's guest. We're very lucky tonight to have with us Jay Smooth, who's here to share his critical perspectives on current topics and issues. We are especially thankful to Jay, who is a cronut connoisseur, that he agreed to come to Pullman despite the fact that you wouldn't find a cronut here if your life depended on it. So thank you, Jay, for coming. And if you don't know what a cronut is, Google it. Google it after the talk. Don't Google it now. Before going further, I want to recognize and thank those units and organizations who helped to sponsor Jay's talk tonight. It's a long list, so settle in. They are the Humanities Planning Group, the College of Education, the Department of Teaching and Learning, the Western Journal of Black Studies, the School of Politics, Philosophy, and Public Affairs, the Department of Sociology, the Women's Studies Development Fund, the Office of Equity and Diversity, Diversity Education, the Department of Foreign Languages and Cultures, the College of Arts and Sciences, the Department of English, the Division of Student Affairs, Multicultural Student Services, the Department of History, the George and Bernadine Converse Historical Endowment, and Roots of Contemporary Issues. So thanks to all for making this opportunity possible. And so now, why are we all here? Jay Smooth is a hip-hop scholar, cultural commentator, and one of the most effective and relatable public intellectuals out there today. Jay's talent for cutting through complicated issues with a critical eye and wit to get to the heart of the matter recalls Malcolm X's entreaty to talk right down to earth in a language that everyone here can easily understand. He is the founder of New York's longest-running hip-hop radio show, The Underground Railroad, on WBAI. He is also the creator of the award-winning web series Ill Doctrine, which is where many of us here tonight first became familiar with Jay's work. His Ill Doctrine video, How to Tell Someone They Sound Racist, as well as his TEDx talk, How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Discussing Race, have become staples in classrooms throughout the country. And I'm sure that I am not the only teacher who has a what would Jay Smooth do moment at least once a week. And Jay, you might think about trademarking that, I'm just saying. He has contributed to, and his videos have been featured on NPR, Current TV, MSNBC, and Color Lines. And he has joined Race Forward as a video strategist, creating video content that addresses systemic racism. His talk tonight is entitled Hip Hop, Race, and Politics, The Way We Talk About Things. We are so very excited to have him here at WSU, so please join me in welcoming Jay Smooth.
All right. Check 1, 2. All right. Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you for that introduction. I am indeed known on the internet either as the guy who's always complaining about racism or the cronut guy. So I was glad that we covered all those bases. So yeah, my name is Jay Smooth. I come from the world of old school hip hop where people have names like that. And 25 years ago, when I was still a teenager and Jay Smooth sounded like a cool name, I started doing my radio show, The Underground Railroad, and I've been blessed ever since then to have a career representing the music and culture that I love in a bunch of different ways, and help build up New York's underground scene in the 90s, get to know a lot of my heroes, give a lot of people some of their first breaks. And over the years, I've also gotten to use the voice that hip-hop gave me to speak about politics and social justice and be a part of the conversation on issues that I care about. And I do that most famously, I guess, on my video blog, Ill Doctrine, which is basically an ongoing video commentary series where I yell at everybody about being nicer to each other and look for ways to take all of these difficult conversations and make them a little more real, a little more compassionate, a little more productive, and look for ways that we can effectively challenge each other to turn their phones off. No, I'm not shaming you. It happens to everybody. Ways that we can challenge each other to make our shared community a little more compassionate. And I want to start off by showing a quick example, which is a video I made quite a while ago about a slang term that hopefully you all are not familiar with. Hopefully it's gone out of style by now, but 6 or 7 years ago, people really liked to say no homo for any and every reason. And I was working for Current TV at the time, and they asked me to make a video explaining it. So I made this video to explain to people what no homo is and why it was terrible. One of my favorite things about hip-hop is our everlasting love of language. One of my least favorite things about hip-hop is our everlasting fear of being gay. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised that one of our favorite slang terms combines our tremendous passion for wordplay with our tremendous insecurity about sexuality. The no homo phenomenon is an old thing, a sad old thing, but it's still a new thing to a lot of old people. So as a public service, I will now present a brief history of no homo. The phrase no homo, which traces back to an earlier slang word, pause, is a defense mechanism utilized by young men who are not only afraid of being gay or looking gay, they're actually afraid that the words they speak might sound linguistically gay.
It's basically when someone says something that could be even vaguely construed as homoerotic or homosexual, someone will put a no homo either before or after the phrase.
No homo was first popularized by New York's Dipset crew, led by the rapper Cameron, who was known for being clever with words and also for wearing a lot of pink, and wanted to be absolutely certain that nobody inferred anything from that. And since Dipset's fan base is made up largely of hip-hop bloggers like myself, who also tend to love playing with words while feeling insecure about our geekiness, the blog world quickly fell in love with no homo and turned it into a never-ending contest to see who could use it the most often and in the most outlandish ways. And at this point, a lot of people who didn't intend to be homophobic were still attracted to the comedic device and the absurdity of it, and they felt like they could use no homo without being anti-gay.
This is a juvenile game we play. It's no disrespect to anybody at all.
It's so absurd and stupid that it's mad funny.
And some people argue that when they take it to such a silly extreme, they're really critiquing and satirizing homophobia instead of promoting it. So the question is, how do you decide when, if ever, it's okay to play the no homo game? Me personally, I've always been in the anti-no homo camp and felt like it was offensive no matter how you said it. But even I have to admit that whenever I have a conversation about it, I always get tempted to start playing the game even when I'm in the middle of rejecting and denouncing it. And I tell myself that I'm only saying it to make fun of people who really say it, and I'm with my friends, and I know that they know that I don't mean it like that, so it's just harmless fun. But then once you start, it gets really hard to stop, and you find yourself saying it every 10 seconds for the rest of the night, and you don't really remember why you started saying it, and even though you tell yourself that you can stop anytime, the truth is you are now a no homo addict. Don't let this happen to you. I'm not gonna say that nobody should ever say it, because just like with any other word, you really gotta judge on a case-by-case basis, but as a general rule, if you're not the original target of an insult, you can't be the one to reclaim it. And 9 times out of 10, if you're not sure whether you should use it, you probably shouldn't. Plus, it's like 5 years old and it's kind of played out. So if you never heard of no homo before you saw this video, just forget I brought it up. Forget that it came out of my mouth. I'm not gonna say it. So I've been making those videos for about, oh, no, we don't need to hear it twice. for about 9 years now, and I've done a lot of different kinds of media, but this has been the most rewarding work I've done. It's made so many connections with people, sparked so many great conversations. It's come to be used in colleges and universities around the world and become sort of part of the canon of social justice warrior propaganda, which I'm deeply proud of. And I'm most proud of that because it means that I'm getting to use the voice that hip-hop gave me to pass on the principles and ideals that I took from hip-hop. So I want to try to talk today about some of those lessons and ideals that I take from my experience with hip-hop, and that I bring with me whenever I'm talking about these other issues in the world. And I should say, I think it's important to frame this around the ideals, because in the hip-hop world, we've gotten a really ugly, brutal reminder recently of how much distance there can be between the lived reality of a culture and its ideals. And I'll get back into that in more detail later, but it's definitely redoubled my commitment to being aware and mindful of that distance. And I want to talk today about what I've learned from hip-hop about the value of community, the power of carving out space for community where marginalized people can be seen and heard, and the work required to maintain that community and keep its lived reality somewhere in the proximity of its ideals. Because hip-hop's ideals, hip-hop's vision of community, when it's done right, is a powerful thing. I'm sure some of you are familiar with hip-hop's origin story in the most desolate part of America, in the South Bronx, which was not desolate by accident, it was desolate by program. The most forgotten, marginalized, invisible people cobbled together the scraps of technology they had around and built a space where they could see and be seen, and basically a space where they could throw a party. And I think it's important to remember that context for hip-hop's origins, because people like to speak of hip-hop's early days as if it was always this explicitly political movement speaking truth to power. But hip-hop's original foundational revolutionary act was figuring out where the party's at. It was creating this space where everyone could come together and just put on their best clothes, dance their best dances, and make their voice seen and heard, and reaffirm their humanity through being seen and heard on their own terms in their own community. And that community they created became so powerful that the world's most invisible people had the whole world watching. That's been replicated around the world with other cultures speaking their reality through it. And it has played the same role powerfully for so many people on an individual level, one of whom was young Jay Smooth, because I grew up as a really deeply socially isolated kid. I would spend all day at school not talking to anyone. I would come home at the end of the day and say hi to my mom, and I'd have a frog in my throat that you have when you first wake up, because I hadn't spoken to anyone the whole day. And in those teenage years, when right now seems like forever, I thought it would always be like that. I literally thought I would never really connect with other humans. But that began to change gradually when I turned 16 and got this internship at New York's hippie left-wing radio station, WBAI. Started interning under someone named Amy Goodman, who's well known now for Democracy Now! And soon after that, got to do this show, The Underground Railroad, and that radio community, and then New York's hip-hop community gave me a place where I felt safe to be seen and be heard, and it gave me a voice. So I have been committed ever since then to representing that hip-hop tradition of carving out a space where marginalized people reaffirm and strengthen their humanity by being seen and heard on their own terms. And I've devoted my life to that, but the thing about devoting your life to a childhood passion is it doesn't always grow old gracefully with you. And being a grown-up adult hip-hopper who is devoted to holding up the culture means you have to figure out how to engage with a culture that you love that's doing things that you hate. hip hop, like any other culture or community made up of flawed human beings, has over the years fallen into the same patterns of exclusion that it started off as a refuge from, created its own classes of marginalized people with misogyny and homophobia. And that means being an adult hip hopper who wants to be a good, thoughtful person requires you to work every day figuring out how to challenge people who share a community that you love, who are doing things that you hate. And that means figuring out how to talk across those differences and challenge people as bluntly and as honestly as they need to be challenged, but doing it in a way that honors your human connection with each other. And that's basically the work I was trying to do in that No Homo video, sort of trying to reach people about a way they're missing someone else's humanity without just alienating myself from them. And that is the same work that I've tried to bring with me into any work that I do talking about politics and social justice issues, figuring out how we can talk across differences and be real and be blunt, be as honest as we can, while still keeping the conversation grounded in our common bond of humanity instead of falling into the trap of alienating from each other's humanity because of those differences. And that's a lifelong process I've cultivated within hip hop. I try to take it into my work on other issues as well. And I want to show one more video where I was trying to figure out how to speak across those differences. And this is a video from a long time ago, but it ties into things that are going on right now. And it's named How to Tell Someone They Sound Racist. Race, the final frontier. No matter what channel you watch, no matter what feed you aggregate, it seems like everybody everywhere is talking about race right now. And when everybody everywhere is talking about race, that means sooner or later you're gonna have to tell somebody that they said something that sounded racist. So you need to be ready and have a plan in place for how to approach the inevitable "that sounded racist" conversation. And I'm going to tell you how to do that. The most important thing that you've got to do is remember the difference between the "what they did" conversation and the "what they are" conversation. Those are two totally different conversations, and you need to make sure that you pick the right one. The "what they did" conversation focuses strictly on the person's words and actions and explaining why what they did and what they said was unacceptable. This is also known as the "that thing you said was racist" conversation, and that's the conversation that you want to have. The "what they are" conversation, on the other hand, takes things one step further and uses what they did and what they said to draw conclusions about what kind of person they are. This is also known as the "I think you are a racist" conversation. This is the conversation you don't want to have, because that conversation takes us away from the facts of what they did and the speculation about their motives and intentions, and those are things you can only guess at, you can't ever prove, and that makes it way too easy for them to derail your whole argument. And that is the part that's crucial to understand. When you say, "I think he's a racist," that's not a bad move because you might be wrong. That's a bad move because you might be right. Because if that dude really is racist, you want to make sure you hold him accountable and don't let him off easy. And even though intuitively it feels like the hardest way to hit him is just run up on him and say, "I think your ass is racist," when you handle it that way, you're actually letting him off easy, because you're setting up a conversation that's way too simple for him to derail and duck out of. Just think about how this plays out every time a politician or a celebrity gets caught out there. It always starts out as a "what they did" conversation, but as soon as the celebrity and their defenders get on camera, they start doing judo flips and switching it into a "what they are" conversation. "I have known this person for years, and I know for a fact that they are not a racist, and how dare you claim to know what's inside their soul just because they made one little joke about watermelon tap dancing and going back to Africa." And then you try and explain that we don't need to see inside their soul to know that they shouldn't have said all that about the watermelon, and you try to focus on the facts of the situation, but by then it's too late, because the "what they are" conversation is a rhetorical Bermuda Triangle where everything drowns in a sea of empty posturing until somebody just blames it all on hip-hop and we forget the whole thing ever happened. Don't let this happen to you. When somebody picks my pocket, I'm not going to be chasing him down so I can figure out whether he feels like he's a thief deep down in his heart. I'm going to be chasing him down so I can get my wallet back. I don't care what he is, but I need to hold him accountable for what he did. And that's how we need to approach these conversations about race. Treat them like they took your wallet and focus on the part that matters, holding each person accountable for the impact of their words and actions. I don't care what you are. I care about what you did. So I made that video almost exactly 8 years ago, and I felt like I needed to show it again because most people don't know that video was specifically inspired by Bill Clinton in 2008, sort of talking sideways and funny style about Jesse Jackson with weird implications about Barack Obama. And it has been, I guess funny is not the word, but it's been interesting to see him revert to the exact same thing in the last couple of weeks, shading Black Lives Matter in the same way. And I think there's a lesson there that what we're seeing from Donald Trump is not really a left turn from the Republican Party and what the two-party system has been doing a long time in terms of pandering to a certain base. Republicans have been leading the way for decades now, really ever since they implemented the Southern strategy of using coded language to pander to people's racism and animosity. But Democrats have been playing catch up when they can and trying to catch the leftovers. And Bill Clinton specifically has done that going back to 24 years ago when he demonized the young rapper Sister Soldier. He did it 8 years ago. We can see him doing it again now. So when we see Donald Trump playing the games that he's playing, he's really just ripping the mask off a little bit more of a game that's been going on a long time. But this video came out 8 years ago, and usually you put a video on YouTube and it stays up for maybe 48 hours getting views and it goes away. But this one has continually gotten steady traffic, people coming to the comment section on YouTube to call me the N-word, but also to have real conversations and try to figure out how we can discuss these things. And I think it speaks to how much hunger there is for better ways to grapple with the race conversation, especially. And the basic principle I was trying to represent is figuring out how to move away from the all or nothing good person, bad person understanding of racism and sexism, ableism, heterosexism, all of those divisions. Because we tend to think of these things as racism is something that bad people do, and I'm a good person, so I couldn't be racist. Sexism is something that bad people fall into. I'm a good person, I wouldn't be sexist. And that means if someone suggests that you made a mistake or you had a gap in your knowledge, you translate that in your mind as, oh, well, you're suggesting maybe I'm not a good person, and a bunch of defense mechanisms come up. This is a process almost all of us go through when we're on the more privileged end of the conversation. I'm not singling any one group out. And it's a trap that we need to escape, because the reality is all of us as good people who are imperfect human beings, we all have the same tendencies to develop implicit bias and unconscious attitudes we're not aware of. We all, when we see someone, we go through an unconscious process of in-group, out-group categorization. There are all these synapses firing in every human interaction that we're not aware of that determine how we relate to someone and think about them. We're all constantly absorbing media that encourages us to relate to other people a certain way. We're all gonna have gaps in our knowledge that prevent us from speaking to someone and treating them with the respect that they deserve. That's just a natural human thing that all good people are gonna fall into. And that means that we need to move away from thinking of goodness as this pure state of being that you achieve, and think of goodness as a practice that we all maintain every day and cultivate the same way that you cultivate good hygiene by brushing your teeth every day. I made a follow-up video about this, that it's the same way you would tell someone they've got something stuck in their teeth, and they're not gonna take that as an insult. You're not gonna say, oh, well, you're saying you think I'm a dirty person because I've got something stuck as my teeth? That's just a confirmation that I think you want to be clean, and you need to get that thing off your teeth. So we need to move to a space where telling each other that we may have said something racist, we may have done something sexist, we may have acted in an ableist way, is no different than telling someone they've got something racist stuck in their teeth. We need to take that as a compliment and an affirmation of our goodness and be able to work together on cultivating goodness as a practice. But that's a difficult bridge to jump over, getting to that point where if I challenge you about something you did, it's because I see the human being that I'm speaking to beneath our beneath our disagreement, that I see the common humanity beneath our disagreement, and I believe there's goodness to be cultivated there. That's what's happening when we challenge each other, but it's difficult for us to reach that understanding. And I've gotten lots of feedback about this video helping people speak to their family, speak to friends about things. I've also heard many, many times that it doesn't work. No matter how you broach the conversation, people still put up the defense mechanisms. But I think it's still worth making the effort, because the objective of these conversations is not always to spark an epiphany in the other person. That's going to happen 1 out of 1,000 times. It's still worth it to take your best shot at that 1 out of 1,000, but almost every conversation we have now creates a public document that's going to be there forever. We all discuss these issues online, and you never know who is going to find this little seed that you planted in our environment of ideas. You never know who's going to come to it 6 months from now, a year from now, and the clarity that you brought is going to help them and reach them and bring their forward and their understanding. And you never know how the person that you're speaking to might have that seed planted, and 6 months later, it'll bloom into some thoughts that they'll take credit for coming up with on their own, but it was really you who put the seed there. I saw this working at a group home in the 90s. That was my job throughout the 90s, working with so-called emotionally disturbed kids. And one of the things I learned right away was, instead of trying to exert your will and make them back down, if you put them in a position where they can feel like it was their choice to do this thing, if you can give them enough space to feel like they came to it on their own, they're going to be much more likely to make the choice you were trying to bring them towards. And I think it works the same way with all these conversations. Give someone the space to take in the information, process it, and then maybe feel like it was their idea to come onto your side. And I think those are the ways that progress can happen, bit by bit, in ways that are easy to underestimate when it feels like you're beating your head against the wall, having the same conversation over and over and over. And that also doesn't mean that I think there's no place for anger, there's no place for militancy or shade. Doesn't mean I think there's no place for straight up dragging somebody when we have these debates. I mean, this sort of diplomatic, precise way of speaking that I'm advocating for, I think, is an important tool to implement when the circumstance allows for it. But sometimes you're just going to need the self-care and the boundary setting of telling somebody off. You're going to need to let someone know that no matter what they understand about why you're telling them, you need them to stop treating you that way. And you're just going to need to do whatever's necessary to get that message across. And when someone is fully committed to detaching from their humanity, I think the most humane thing you can do in that moment for you and for them and for yourself is to do whatever's necessary to prevent them from doing harm. So I'm not against telling people off in one of these debates or straight up dragging them, as long as it doesn't become your default and you just do it all the time because it's fun. Because whenever you detach from someone else's humanity that way, you're giving up a little piece of your humanity. So when it becomes your default mode of engagement, which I think some people do fall into on social media, I mean, I think the way that Twitter social justice mobs are demonized is BS. I think it's done more good than harm by a wide margin, the new level of accountability that we can bring to people and the way that we can bring our voices together collectively. So I'm not joining in with that sort of John Ronson, everybody stop shaming everybody messaging. But I do think there is a tendency with this great newfound power we have to fall into indulgent habits sometimes and sort of become Walter White and start doing it because it makes me feel alive. And I think it's important to make sure that we're only doing it when we need to and leave ourselves open to opportunities for empathy when we have those engagements. And one more thing I want to say about this sort of focus on how we have conversations, which is what a lot of my work usually winds up focusing on. I use the word conversation way too much, and I know everyone is tired of hearing about the national conversation on race. When are we going to start the national conversation about racism? And I'm sure we all have national conversation fatigue, so I think it's important to keep in mind these tools for communicating across difference are not only important because they make our social interactions a little bit less awkward. These tools are most important because we need to be able to communicate across difference in order to work together and build inclusive coalitions that are going to work towards changing the institutions and systems that create those divisions, that create those inequities, that create those invisibilities in the first place. And I think this generation, Black Lives Matter, and all the other movements that have come up from this generation. I don't want to put everything under the Black Lives Matter umbrella because I don't think it's healthy for everything to become associated with one brand. That's no shade to them, but there's lots of people doing great work in many different lanes. But I think all of them have been building these coalitions that communicate across difference in ways that we did not see even in that golden age of the civil rights movement that people love to compare Black Lives Matter to and say that Black Lives Matter has no vision and they have no plan. I mean, the March on Washington had basically no women in it. The women who were there had to march down a different street. Dr. King's Collective was always almost entirely a boys' club of other male Baptist preachers. Bayard Rustin, one of the most important strategists in the civil rights movement, basically got chased out the back door because he was gay. And in this generation, you're not seeing any of that. You're seeing queer black women coin the term Black Lives Matter. We're seeing a coalition coming together in ways you've never seen before. And I think that's vitally important because it's that kind of community that's capable of that kind of communication to maintain community that's going to enable us to push through these next step forwards of what Dr. King himself called the post-civil rights movement. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Black Lives Matter has made as much progress as it has, specifically focusing on being community-based instead of being built around individual heroes. And that question of movements built around heroes has been on my mind. And I basically had to rewrite this whole talk over the last couple of days because of the news that came out in our hip hop world, which a lot of you may not have even heard about this, but in my corner of the world, it's just cataclysmic news that so far 3 different men have come forward with allegations, you see, we're always forced to use language that implies doubt about the survivors. But men have come forward with stories of abuse by Africa Bambaataa, one of hip-hop's foremost pioneers, one of the most central figures. And let me be clear, I'm saying the word allegedly because I have to, not because I doubt the stories of these survivors. But this news is a terrible blow. The idea that such a central figure to our culture, someone that we all look up to as a pioneer, one of the pillars who passed down the ideals, that he was perpetrating the worst kind of inhumanity, allegedly, and that numerous people at the core, at the nucleus of our culture from the beginning, had to know this was happening and let it happen, did not stop it, that they put protecting the image of this heroic figure ahead of protecting the lives of our children. That's something that everyone in my world is trying to grapple with right now, and it's going to be forcing us to rethink a lot of things. My friend Kiese Lehman said it should never be too much of sure that there are a lot of things that we have to unlearn. There's so much about our understanding of manhood and toxic masculinity that's preventing us from even beginning this discussion. I know for sure we need to unlearn the lie that being gay has anything to do, has any connection to being a predator or an abuser. I see so many people already discussing this story as if being gay and being a predator somehow go hand in hand. They have nothing to do with each other. We've got to unlearn that. There are so many things that we've got to unlearn. And in a bigger sense, in a bigger sense, all of us who love hip hop and feel a connection to its history, every conversation we have about hip hop is going to be shifted. I mean, any talk that I write is going to have some, at least, indirect reference to Afrika Bambaataa. So I can't speak about him the same way in a talk now. And it's like, I was telling Lisa, it's like when you go back in time and kill a bug and then you come back and the whole universe has changed. I just had to change a little bit at the beginning, but then I got to change how this is phrased. I got to change this. Pretty soon I have to remake this entire talk. So this is going to shift our whole understanding of what hip hop is, what it means for us to be hip hoppers in ways that I can't even foresee. But I think it's a shift that needed to happen. Because here's the thing, when we talk about history, we take shortcuts. We take all these complex, interconnected stories of people and events, and we winnow them down into a story we can tell about individual figures that embody those trends and those ideals, and those people over time get to be known as heroes. And that's what we've always done when we talk about hip hop. We say, okay, these are the three founding fathers, and they handed down these elements, and then we did. And anyone who has looked closely knows that that's an oversimplification, and it wasn't exactly like that. But we all do it. I do it, and I've always assumed that's harmless. People know that you're just telling the story, and that's how we tell history. But I'm thinking more and more that it's not harmless, that there's a danger in telling the story of our movements and telling the story of community through the mythology of heroes. Because the thing is, when you put yourself in a position where your sense of self is tied to being a part of a movement, and that movement is built upon this heroic figure who perfectly embodied these ideals and handed them down to you, the more you're invested in that, the more incentive you have to look the other way when that heroic figure was less than righteous, when they were on the wrong path, when they betrayed those ideals. Because if that heroic figure crumbles and they're the foundation of your movement, what is your movement and what is your sense of self? So that we have put ourselves in a dangerous position where we're going to be willing to turn our back, apparently, on even the ugliest of things in order to preserve our sense of having this hero as the foundation. So I think there's a lesson here that we need to get away from that, because nothing has ever been about that. The civil rights movement was not Dr. King's movement. That was collective action by hundreds of people around the country. And this is what Diane Nash and Ella Baker were telling us at the time. You can see this in the movie Selma. Much as it does focus on Dr. King, you see all these other figures are central, and it didn't happen without all of them. Hip hop didn't happen from those three people. It was a community of hundreds of people from all the boroughs. Grandmaster Flowers in Brooklyn. It wasn't even just in the South Bronx. It was all these people coming together with all of their complex, messy, imperfect, often traumatized, often sick selves coming together to figure out how to find the path and keep each other on the path. That's the same way each movement, that's what Bernie Sanders is not happening because of Bernie Sanders. That's us taking our energy and figuring out how to harness it through him as a conduit. And we need to remember that after the election's over, because we need to keep doing it. And Black Lives Matter and that entire sector of activism, all the different flavors that are known in the media as Black Lives Matter, they are more transparently than ever not about heroes. They're about a community of human beings figuring out together how to keep each other on that path, how to protect each other from harm, from people who have gone too far off that path. And that is the kind of movement grounded in community where we all recognize our responsibility to make that community and make that movement what it needs to be. That's the kind of movement that we need to be really clear-sighted on building from now on. Because there are people out there like Donald Trump who are offering something to people who are really hungry to have something to believe in. He's offering something that from a distance looks like community. It gives you some of the core elements of community. You're a part of something bigger than yourself. You have a sense of purpose. You believe that someone's going to make everything right. But it's not a community. It doesn't have any of that loving core. It doesn't have any of that compassion. It's built on fear and hate. And Donald Trump is basically using the illusion of community to recruit people into a gang. And that means, and it's not about Donald Trump. He's just picking up on a tradition that's been going on. He's the one that's doing it more brazenly. But the ground is most fertile for it right now because people who are susceptible to that kind of hate see that the tide of history is turning against them. So it's like a sun flaring out. It's threatening to explode right now. And that means we need to be building our own true, loving, mobilized, healthy communities that are going to offer something more compelling and more powerful than that sort of Donald Trump gang. We need to be building mobilized communities and movements that are strong enough to change these institutions and systems that make people feel so invisible that they'll settle for a gang instead of a community. And that work is not going to happen from conversation alone, but there's no way that it happens unless we figure out how to speak across difference, how to ask each other the tough questions we need to ask, how to recognize that what unites us all as human beings is that none of us knows what the hell we're doing, and that means we all need to be doing our part to keep this community on the path, keep each other from harming each other. We need to be doing our part to make real community that at the very least ensures that all of us are safe to be seen and heard. So thank you very much for having me here.
So if you have questions, come to a mic. Come to a mic. And after 20 minutes of the Q&A, I'll be outside with the stamp, and there is also food as part of a reception.
Jay,
Yes.
I'll try to say this with not being as controversial as I can, but a lot of your speak and what I see with Black Lives Matter, they're angry at a system that has oppressed them for hundreds of years. But what I haven't seen is they're angry at their own communities for the gang members that go around killing their own people. So while they're quick, as any other system is, as the American system is, to point out the faults of all these other countries, but it doesn't want to talk about its own faults of slavery for 200 years, I correlate that to Black Lives Matter. They're quick to point out the racist system and the oppression in it, but they're not so quick to point out what's going on in their own communities. Does that make sense?
It makes sense in the way that I understand your question, but I do not agree with the premise. I think, first of all, I mean, we should say there's no such thing as black-on-black crime. Every ethnic group fundamentally, primarily, almost entirely commits crimes against their own group. That's across the board. That's not a black thing. But the other thing is, when you are protesting the state, when you are protesting outside entities, you have to do that in a form that the world is going to see. When you are trying to deal with problems that are in your own community, you do it within your own community. Cameras are usually not going to be there. It's not going to be a publicity stunt. It's not going to be a public event. So it's easy to assume that black people are not trying to work on things within their own community because you're not seeing it on TV, but that's not the case. That work is going on all the time. There are community programs all around the country. There are people working on this every day. I wasn't just working at a group home every day because I was getting 6 figures, believe me. I was trying to help these kids, and that goes on all around the country, and we can't underestimate how much that goes on just because we don't see it in the spotlight. And look, Black Lives Matter is a specific group that has come together around a specific task, which is bringing light to injustice in our system of policing. Every group is not supposed to address every issue, and complaining that Black Lives Matter does not address crime within the black community is a bit like saying, why isn't my dentist fixing my sink? That's not what he's supposed to be, that's not what he or she, pardon me, is supposed to be doing. They have their job, and we need to be able to specialize. Everyone is not supposed to be addressing every issue at all times, and just because you see someone speaking on this issue today does not mean that that's the only issue they've ever spoken on or cared about. That's a trap we all fall into in social media, policing what each other is posted about. It's not legitimate there, and I don't think it's legitimate in this case either.
I understand that I wasn't complaining about Black Lives Matter. I was asking a question for discussion, because without discussion you don't get anywhere.
Sure.
And I also understand that every race and every ethnicity commits crimes against itself. But what I was saying, and I understand the work that goes on in inner city by pastors and other. I've read about it, studied it, I've seen it. I spent 25 years in prison growing up around inner city black youth, talked to them, got to know them, because I wanted to learn what they went through. But what I am saying is that you're right, the media doesn't cover what goes on in the community as much as a national movement, which Black Lives Matter became more national. But with that still said, to me, with Black Lives Matter, I still don't see that. I understand that they're fighting the system and the policing, but I still don't see that they're trying to take issues in the whole issue in their own community. They're only picking out a certain piece, and that is the policing issue.
Well, yeah, I agree, but I don't agree that that's a problem.
So I got 2 questions. So why do you think the racial divide in America is becoming more apparent than any recent decade that I've been alive? And do you think with the current political system we can actually get stuff done?
Those are 2 really easy questions. I mean, I think our racial divides have evolved in a lot of complex ways. I mean, clearly there's been undeniable advancement since the days of Jim Crow, and it would be a disservice to our elders who fought for those changes to speak as if things are exactly the same. But certainly there's a whole new batch of struggle along with a lot of the same struggle continuing. And there's so much psychological stress that comes now from the way that covert racism is the more dominant form than overt, which means almost anything that's happening will not produce a smoking gun. It happens in subtle ways. It happens in coded ways, which means you have to make an inference. And the stress of that constant uncertainty, that's the reason that people talk about microaggressions being a problem. Like, that wears on you over time. I've learned that just from being in New York City. Some subway lines have a thing that tells you how long it is until the next train is coming. So I'm going to be annoyed, but I know exactly how to be annoyed. I know how long I'm going to be annoyed, and it reduces the stress. If I'm in a station that doesn't have that readout, maybe the train's coming in 20 minutes. I don't know. Something is happening. I can't be sure what. Any sort of uncertainty magnifies whatever stress you're being put under. And so much of the racism we face now is cloaked in uncertainty, which means extra psychological burden for you. And it means whenever you bring it up, people are going to dismiss it and poo-poo it as, oh, that's all in your head. So I think there's a lot of tension that comes just from that. And I think, like I said, the arc of history which doesn't just automatically bend itself. It's not like The Secret. It will bend if we keep doing the work. But it has been bending bit by bit towards progress, and people who are accustomed to relating to America in a certain way as a white country where no matter how much they're being exploited by the system, they can take comfort in being one step above black people. The more that shifts, the more desperate people are going to be, and the more they're going to lash out and cling to extremist messages. So I think there's a bunch of factors that are making things complex right now, which in some ways are evidence of gradual progress, but still add their new form of stress. And wait, what was the other question?
Do you think with the wait, hold on, I gotta look. And do you think with the current political system we could actually get some real stuff done?
Oh man. I mean, look, on a national level, the system is not looking very functional. But I will say there's always great opportunity on a local level to get involved in issues where you live. And I think you can in many ways have the most impact that way. It's easiest to get involved. My friend ran for city council in Brooklyn a while back, and I sat with him in these club meetings for the Democratic Party, where it's just 10 random schmoes decide who the candidate is going to be. You can go to this clubhouse and be one of those 10 random schmoes and help to build what the representation is going to be on a local level and impact policies that have direct effect on the lives of your community. So I think we need to be looking for ways to do that more and more. And how to affect long-term change that makes the entire system more functional is obviously, a question that's hard enough to answer that Bernie Sanders has 20,000 people coming out in the Bronx. So hopefully we'll harness that energy into finding answers, but I certainly don't know what it is off the top.
Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders?
I mean, I'm voting for Bernie in the primary. But, we'll see. The other thing about this whole system is I live in New York, so I politely pretend that my vote matters, but the way the Electoral College works is it's just a charade. New York is going to go to the Democrats, so there's no reason for me not to vote for Jill Stein or Bismarcky or whoever I want to. So people who shame someone for voting for Ralph Nader, as I did back in the days, are usually not being realistic because you probably did it in a state where it was already decided where all the delegates were going to go. So I think we need to get rid of the Electoral College, first of all. There shouldn't be any caucuses. Shouldn't only be primaries. A lot of fundamental changes that need to happen. But I'm voting for Bernie. That's the answer.
I have a question. You talked about no homo and about homosexuals and about how being gay and being a predator are two ideas that we associate with one another. And I wanted to know how this idea possibly came into play and how do we change the way that we associate these two issues with one another?
How did it come into play? What is the nature and origin of prejudice? I think religious influence is a part of it. I think when people are excluded over time and that becomes a status quo, it becomes easier and easier to dehumanize that and accept that as the norm and not even think about it. And hip hop, like many subcultures and facets of American society, has just maintained itself as a cisgender heterosexual boys club for a long time. Just like I was saying about the civil rights movement, you can see that all around. I'm not trying to take blame off of hip hop by pointing out that it's elsewhere, because I think we should set the bar higher than being equally dysfunctional as the rest of America. The whole point of hip hop was we were going to do better. But I think the status quo perpetuates itself and prevents you from. That sounds like I'm making excuses for it, but it's easy to be in a status quo and not realize you're the frog in the water that's cooking you and turning you into a homophobe when it's been preserved as a space where you're not exposed to those other ideas for so long.
Oh, it's me. Okay, I have two questions. One of them is kind of similar to Manny's. Where do you see the racial divide going within the next 20 years? And which hip hop artist do you think is most influential today that will like help uplift the Black community? Who is your favorite or favorites? Because there's like, yeah.
Where will it go? I don't want to try to predict where things will be going in 20 years. I think it will probably look like we're not making any progress, and we'll have to look through a long lens to see how the next few steps came. I wish I had the quote in front of me, but Martin Luther King had a meeting with the SCLC in 1967 where he talked about how now that we've achieved all the major civil rights legislation that we're going to, this is when the real hard, long, thankless work starts of moving from legal equality to true equality. And that's going to be work that doesn't have any grand strokes or grand victories. It involves changing the entire system, looking at capitalism and militarism along with racism. And, he spent the last few years of his career beating his head against that wall, not having any more moments of glory. That's been handed on to us generation by generation, and we've been figuring that out bit by bit. And I think progress is really slow. It brings backlash that makes it look like we're moving in the wrong direction. So I don't think the demographic majority of people of color is going to have any huge impact as people predict. I don't think that's how it works. But I'm hopeful that we have more ways to connect and share ideas and build our understanding and mobilize, bring global attention to local issues. I think we have more tools to do the work than we've had before. So hopefully we'll have moved 3 or 4 inches instead of 2 inches in the last 20 years. And the rapper who's most influential in I don't think we should put the weight on any artist of lifting our people up. Artists. I think that's and I'm not saying that you're doing this, but in what people call the golden age of hip hop or the conscious era, there were expectations put on these young artists to basically fill the void of Black leadership that had been created by the end of the civil rights movement and COINTELPRO. And these are 22-year-old musicians who were trying to express themselves artistically. And I think part of why that era didn't last so long is you can't expect a young musician to implement a policy paper over the course of an album. An artist's work is to inspire people to go out there and do the work. And I think there are a lot of artists that are doing that. Obviously, Kendrick and J. Cole are the 2 most prominent. Neither of them are perfect. J. Cole especially has gender issues in his music. But they're setting a standard, first of all, of being committed to the craft and trying to make music that has some meat on its bones, and also expressing ideas and putting some thought into the messages they're putting out into the world. And I think that's going to pull more people into that direction, and it's going to pull the industry towards pushing voices like that, because people will theorize that there's been a conspiracy to get positive music off the airwaves. But the music industry is apolitical. They don't care. They're capitalists. Whatever makes the most money, they're going to put that out there. And just like Run DMC changed what black music was from then on, just like Nirvana changed what rock music was from then on, if you come out with a compelling enough sound that pulls people in and sells enough copies, the music industry is going to get 20 more people who sound just like that. So the more that we can cultivate and support those artists, the more we can pull what's in the mainstream towards being something that we want to see represented. And of course, we also need to be connecting with all of the rich hip hop culture that's beneath that spotlight.
Thank you.
Okay. So my question is, for like African American men, the people that they see in the media eye is like these rappers like Young Thug, and yes, you hear like Kendrick Lamar, but it's not what you're listening to on a Friday night. So the image that they have of the black man is like, oh, I gotta get rich, I gotta have this idea of, I'm gonna say like false fame to reach, I'm gonna say financial stability, but when it actually comes out, they're like, oh, listen to my music, and it doesn't take off. And so they don't have anything else necessarily to fall back on, because they're not talking about college degrees. And the people or black men that are in the public eye, like Obama or Bill Cosby, who was going to buy CBS, but all that other stuff happened, they don't have anyone to look up to. So I can see how her question says, like, oh, well, we need these rappers to change this idea of how black, or just like where our generation is headed, but they don't have that because that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about drugs, like regular stuff, but it's more explicit now. So how do we get away from that, or what are they supposed to do?
Well, I think if Bill Cosby was buying every channel on my TiVo, I would still want him to be accountable for what he did. But
with what
okay.
he did, I'm just
okay.
saying, it's like, because I personally think, like, back in that time with Frank Sinatra and X, Y, and Z, like, a lot of stuff was going on. You can't just blame this one person.
I agree with that, but it's the same situation with the officer Peter Liang, who killed a guy Gurley back in New York.
Yeah.
Some, not all, Asian Americans are protesting in defense of Peter Liang, saying there's a double standard, and the logic basically is he should get off because all those white cops get off, and that's a half-truth. There is a double standard, but the correction of that double standard is everyone has proper accountability.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, but the other end of that is Charlie Sheen should be facing the same consequences that Bill Cosby is. Not that we should be mad that they took Bill Cosby down, because he was trying to buy NBC 25 years ago. This happened, and here's the thing: when you're making money for powerful people, that's when they're not going to try to bring you down, because you're making them more money. It's only him being off the map now that made it possible to have any accountability. That's why R. Kelly can still be out there, because he's still making a lot of money for people. That's why Chris Brown is still out there. So I think the idea that this is put in motion by wanting to take down powerful black men, I don't think that's really the dynamic that's going on. But in terms of what you were saying with the messages we get from commercial hip hop about making a quick buck, and I absolutely agree with that. I think the whole system is really exploitative, most of all to the artists. I mean, it goes deeper than them not having a college education to fall back on. I mean, there's been a trend for years now of taking kids directly off of the streets who are caught up in the worst street life, seeing that they're kind of charismatic and they can represent a cinematic version of what they've been living. Not giving them any tools to handle the fame and money they're going to get all of a sudden, knowing that they're going to have their one hit and either fade away or wind up in jail, and then just letting him rot in jail and finding the next kid to milk for the next 3 months. That's what we've seen happen with Bobby Shmurda. That's what we've seen with people like Chief Keef. And that pattern really disturbs me. And I like Bobby Shmurda. I love him. I wish he could be around long enough that he found other things to rap about. But the way the industry is exploiting that type of kid really disturbs me. And I'm not sure what can be done about that, because if people know they can make a quick buck off of expendable black lives, it's probably going to continue. But the more we can big up alternatives to that. And you're right, we need to be making music that's going to compete and be just as much fun to listen to. The conscious era was what it was because KRS, Big Daddy Kane, Public Enemy were making the hottest music at the time. And if they weren't doing that, the messages wouldn't have mattered. So we need to figure out, I agree with you, how to make music that's going to reach the people that need to be reached, instead of it being funneled down a path towards preaching to the choir, which is how the industry's set up nowadays.
Okay, we can take one more question.
Okay, awesome. My turn. So when we were talking about conversations between individuals, when you're talking about individual racism, I was actually wondering what you would advise when talking to people about more institutionalized and structural racism, and them not getting defensive when you're trying to explain these things.
Yeah, I don't know if it's
Big one, yeah.
I don't know if it's any easier. Because people. It's our nature to assume that the status quo that's comfortable for us is a just and proper situation. And a move that's actually towards equity, if it's causing us any dysfunction, any discomfort, that must be something unjust that's happening to us. And recognizing that you are a part of systems and benefit from systems that are hurtful to other people seems not to be an easy thing to wrap around. You know, people are very allergic to the concept of privilege. And the thing about privilege is it should be liberating for you to know that what we're talking about is not something that you created, it's not something that you started, it's something that has been around since before you were born. It's not something that's your fault. That should make it easier for you to not relate to this with personal guilt. Now, there should be a next step of having a sense of collective responsibility for changing that status quo you benefit from. But I don't know. I don't know what the magic bullet is to make that clearer.
All right. It's hard.
I wish the last question was one I had an answer to.
Please join me in thanking Jay Smooth for being here tonight, and thank you all for being here tonight.